Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Open Network User Group podcast. I'm Mark Tierney. I'm ONUG's CTO, and today we're going to continue with the ONUG C-Level Series, driving the hyperautomation narrative through collaboration. Before we get to our guests, listen up. So we just came off of a fantastic fall conference. It was in Manhattan. What a successful conference we had. And spring is right around the corner. It's the spring conference, spring 2023. It will be a hybrid event again. The hybrid audience continues to be amazing, but we're getting back to in-person events, so it's a lot of fun to be back in person. Come check out the ONUG conference experience. Very boutique, very intimate, kind of scene. So check it out. It's going to be in Dallas in May. May of 2023. Exact dates forthcoming. As usual, you'll be able to get a sweet deal if you use Mark's podcast as a promo code when the time is right. I'll keep you posted on it. But come join the ONUG community, global 2,000 companies, enterprise architects, cloud providers, and thought leaders like who we're about to talk to, and as we demonstrate the tenets of multi-cloud. All right, so with that, joining me today on today's ONUG podcast is Arnaldo Zimmerman. Arnaldo is the CEO at ZPE Systems. Arnaldo, welcome to the ONUG podcast.
Thank you for having me on. Hi, guys.
So Arnaldo, I said it to you in our kind of show prep. ZPE has, relatively recently joined the ONUG community as part of the collaboration. And, you've brought some really interesting thought leadership to the discussion. So, in particular, what's happening in what ONUG calls the network cloud space, and there's a heavy working group there, but also in the team formerly known as orchestration and automation now is being rebranded under hyperautomation. And I'm going to want to explore all that stuff with you, particularly hyperautomation. But before we get to that, the ONUG audience wants to get to know you a little bit. So, tell us a little bit about the Arnaldo story.
Yeah, of course. So I'm located here in Bay Area in Silicon Valley, right? So I've been working with IT for the last 25 years, right? With hyperscalers, companies, and developing products for management, right? Out-of-band management. We have been working, innovating in multiple fronts, and I went through these different versions of the solution trying to accomplish the management and the out-of-band management by itself, right? And we landed to this a next generation of a product exactly to fulfill a need where it is very, very in line with what we are discussing with ONUG, the ONUG team, right, in terms of automation. So that experience working with these hyperscalers, right, gave us ideas and gave us the opportunity to explore and to a point that we were able to then bring that experience back to the user group and start discussing with them. So that's basically right. 25 years of working within this space. It's not. It didn't start yesterday, right? It's
no, but I'm going to take you. I want to take you back further. And I love it when I get to talk to C-levels that are actually smart people. You're an engineer, right? Like are you an electrical engineer?
I am, right? Actually, right? If we go back that far, right? I'm an electrical engineer, but I've been working hardware and software, right? So I worked in hardware bring up and device drivers and bootloaders, and then I wrote the code, and then I wrote the manual, and then I gave support to the user. I thought that's part of the learning process, right? And then I progressed within my career and got the teams to lead, and then larger teams to lead, and business units to lead, and that allowed me to grow within the space, but knowing, right, what I'm asking the team to accomplish and be able to listen to what they are telling me as well because of my background, right? So
Exactly,
it was very
and
helpful.
that's why I wanted to go there, right? So many times it's easy to talk to, some book smart CEO that doesn't know how to do stuff, and you know how to do stuff. You've done it, like yeah, and you felt the pain, that engineers and implementers and operators and developers, like you get it all, right? That makes a big difference, I think. I mean, from a credibility perspective, I think that aids to the credibility of your story when you tell it. So, thanks. So tell me how you got to ZPE. What because I said you're the CEO. You're also the co-founder. Is that correct?
I am, right. We co-found this with my other partner, Livio Sassi. We started this company about 9 years ago, right? And the reason why we started this company was because there was a need for a vendor neutral platform, right? And our goal was just to be a software company. That's what we intended to be, and integrate with everybody else. But soon we noticed, right, the need for a platform to run this, right, this software in order to provide the functionality that the customers were asking for. And so then we pivot to be, besides a software company, a hardware company as well, right? And then as this evolved, right, in terms of deployment, and the deployments not only being in the data center, but then expanding this to branches and edge, right? Then customers start pushing us, right, to provide management capabilities through a cloud service, right? And so then today we have hardware, we have software, we have cloud management, right? And we bring all this together to create management plane where people can use that plane to implement automation, right? And so that automation infrastructure requires a platform, right? And that's how we got to be here, right? By creating that platform where automation can run, where the typical out of band can be provided, right? So that's what ZPE offers.
All right, so I honestly think it's perfect how we got here, because it's important. It's important for the audience that, number one, clearly get that you know what you're talking about, and two, you're in a space that is specifically oriented towards that management plane. And I'm not suggesting that's all you do, but I mean, I think is it fair to say, I mean, you guys, sort of cut your teeth on this out of band management, kind of stuff. And now it's grown into, a much broader amount of products and services and software that you provide. It seems like a good time or a good place for us to, jump into, the topic at hand. So, a little over a year ago, Gartner, drops this, this concept of hyper automation, and I've said this on other pods. That tends to send the industry into a tizzy, right? That you have now suppliers needing to change their marketing, and as well as actually their products and services, potentially to do that new thing, right? And now you've got enterprise consumers wanting, well, sometimes there's questions to be answered, right? Like, what are we doing in this space? Why aren't we doing it? How much does it cost? Where is it going to help? So it really stirs up the pot sometimes when these new concepts hit the floor. And sometimes they're actually new concepts. Sometimes they're just a renamed or rebranded thing that's already been done. But I think hyper automation is a little different. So let's take a minute and get your perspective. From where you sit, what does hyper automation mean? To you, not just CPE, but just to the industry. On the whole, what is the promise of hyper automation mean to you, Arnaldo?
Yeah, so to me, hyperautomation is something that evolved, right, from the basics of having access to then allowing to automate and then finally to hyperautomate, right? So the hyperautomation really addresses, right, a couple of IT problems, right? And we actually had an article, Winter is Looming, where we listed some of those problems that hyperautomation can address, right? First, the hyperautomation addresses the scalability, right? We work with these hyperscalers, and the only way that they can deploy hundred thousands of racks, right, in a year is really by doing the programmatically, right, by pushing the configuration, pushing the policies consistently through an automation, right? The second thing that I see in the hyperautomation is that as that deployment is expanding, not just in the data center, but going to the branches and the edges in the remote locations, now there is this exposure for cybersecurity, right? And there's still, right, a ransomware attacks out there, right? We actually wrote an article about more than 80% of the cybersecurity is actually caused by human error, right? So hyperautomation can address that by running a pre-validated, right, and safe process across your deployments. And then the other thing that I see hyperautomation helping with is the technology, right? The technology nowadays it's complex. Right? It requires IT personnel that are expert on different topics. Right? And that lack of resources, especially now during pandemic, that lack of resources, right, causes pain, right? Because now you need to move people around, right? And if you don't have remote access or a way to push that configuration, right, from a central location, right, and now you are lacking that resource to travel all around, right? So those are, to me, things that hyperautomation is addressing, right, and it is helping. And it is interesting, right, that this is something that our large organizations, our large companies have already figured out, right? And
let me interrupt you. When you say that, are you talking about clients of yours?
Yes.
When you say large organizations, I hear you're talking about clients.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
all right. Yeah,
so the advantage of working with these bleeding edge companies, right, if you want, is that they have very smart people, right, and we get to work, right, to fulfill their needs, right, on how to deploy, how to push these configurations, on how to integrate this, right, in a way that is not just addressing the initial deployment, but then the regular maintenance, right, and maintaining the policies and security, right, throughout the life cycle of the data center or of the site, right?
So, do you feel like so you mentioned several different things, several different areas or domains that hyperautomation could be used and might be enabled. Can you or do you have an opinion on areas that you feel like are a priority? And I'm kind of interested in, like, because they're not always the same, like your opinion about where the priorities should be. And then, maybe I don't, and maybe they're the same, but if they're not, I'd like to know if you feel like there's differences between what you feel like the priority ought to be for implementing hyperautomation solutions or use cases, and what your clients, what you're seeing out there from the enterprise. Is that?
So the way I see this is that cybersecurity and digital service availability are kind of priorities for the business, right? And if you assume that these are the priorities, then you need to have a strategy, right? And the hyperautomation is the long-term strategy for you to achieve that, right? So sometimes we come across, right, customers that they don't have time, right, to make this jump for automation, and then they don't have time to support the business itself, right? And has to be a C-level decision, right, in terms of putting this as a priority, right? So then you're actually investing in the business, not just addressing a cost center. Right?
So when you mention security, are you focusing predominantly on, or do you feel like the industry is and the enterprise is predominantly focusing on event response? Those types of scenarios. What kind of use cases are you thinking or seeing that the enterprise wants to focus on? Attack attack vector mitigation, event processing. Like what's your take on the focus?
Yeah, so it's all above, right? I think is you need to address the cybersecurity with the ability to first push, right, policies that are consistent, right? Now, if you get affected, right, within your branch or remote office or edge, right, then you need to be able to rebuild it, right, in a way that you have an infrastructure already in place that you can go and rip and replace the software, the configuration, and push again and rebuild it, right? So that ability to patch, right, the system in a consistent way, right? There is a new firmware update, and that firmware update eventually renders your network down, right? And how you're going to be able to rebuild it, right? That's the concept, exactly the concept of the double ring that we introduced with the blueprint of the automation, hyper automation that we introduced a couple of weeks ago, right? And that hyper automation recommends, right, a configuration of an infrastructure management plane that allows you to do this remote access to update your site, to address the security vulnerabilities, and to maintain the site secure. Right? I'll tell you a story. Right? This automation plane, management plane, is so important. Right? That in the beginning of the year we had this horrible war starting in Ukraine, right? And one of our customers approached us, asking us to help them to decommission the site, right? So most of the time you are looking at this automation plane or this management plane, right, for automation for deployment. But right, there is a scenario where you don't want to get exposed to your security, your certificates, your network, right? And you need to decommission the site remotely because you cannot be there, right? And that's what we did, right? Through automation, it's like Mission Impossible type of thing, right? Where you start decommission everything and destroying yourself at the very last step, right? So this was possible because the concept of this infrastructure management plane was there, put in place there by this design pattern that they already followed.
Wow, that's a really fascinating use case. All right, I've got one for you. How about stability? Like, do people care about stability, infrastructure stability anymore? Arnaldo, or is security so important that people aren't focused on the potential value of using hyperautomation, AI/ML, kind of functionality to maintain stability? Are you seeing that? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, no, stability is as important as security, right? So it doesn't help you to have the best security if it's not stable, right? And when it's not stable, right, how do you fix it, right?
Yes.
Right. So let me step back and explain to you what these large organizations already figured out, right? Is basically, right, when we were talking about the double rings, right, and what they created there in their scenario, and it was quite interesting because I've been working in this industry for so long, right, and and hit me, right, how this plays together, right, what we are doing plays together. So they already figure out that in order for them to deploy a data center or a site, they first need to deploy this management network, right? Even before they bring their production network and all their service in their sites. So in order, this design pattern, it goes beyond the data center, it goes to the branches and applies to everybody else. So now that you have this in place, right, if your system is attacked or is lacking stability, right, you have a separate management network to go and inspect what's going on, right? And you can automate that process if you want, right? You can now do more with less, because by automating this and having this secure access to your infrastructure, right? Even if you push a firmware update or a configuration that caused the site to go down, you have a Control Z, right, that you can apply for the automation. So this removes the anxiety about automating your environment, because now you have the option to redo it, to rebuild it if it's the case. And that's applied to ransomware as well, right? So now that you have that in place, and if you need to wipe out the entire site and rebuild it, right, you can use the automation process that you use for the initial deployment to redeploy that site, push all the configuration back again, right, and get rid of the exposure eventually that you had there.
So where is the industry going in terms of management across multiple domains of hardware and software? And let me tell you what I mean by this a little bit. I'm going to give you the Mark Tierney's theory of SEV1 criticality, right? Like if I'm dealing with a SEV1, and I've done many, I'm an old ops guy, right? When stuff goes horribly wrong, like really horribly wrong, and you're in a SEV1 situation, and you've got the executive VPs breathing down your neck because you're offline for whatever reason, and now you've got an army of people in a war room trying to figure out what's gone wrong. And my personal experience in this kind of space is that these things get out of control when certain components, hardware or software, not only stop doing what they're designed to do, but also don't realize they're not doing what they're designed to do. So their telemetry's gone. So in other words, routers stop routing and they don't know. Firewalls stop firewalling and they don't know. Traffic management, load balancers stop traffic managing and load balance it, and they don't know about it. And more often than not, in the past, it's taken people with brains to get in and start zeroing in on, where the actual failed component is and why. And I always think this is where AI/ML and hyperautomation, from a stability and availability perspective, should be solving bigger problems. I'm just wondering if it's is it going there? Are these still issues? Do we have systems and telemetry in place on the management plane? Like, I'm totally putting you on the spot here, by the way, but are there solutions now where we can finally start doing these things and isolate, stability issues more effectively? Is that here, or is that coming? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a nice question, actually, right? Because through the management plane, you can collect that type of information, right? You can collect the logs, right, of the devices, right? Too many login attempts or a crash, right, or a performance on a fan, right? You can even measure the fan speed not being inside of the box by measuring the airflow outside of the system. So you can start detecting things, right, and not only messages but also sensoring and start collecting this type of information and gathering the data lakes, right, that are out there. ZPE also has an offering there, right? And using that information to correlate an action, right? And now because you have this plane that allows you for automation, right? You can decide, right, how to respond to that event, right? So today, right, systems are already capable of doing initiate responses in isolation, right, within the region or within the area where they are detecting this. But with the second ring, right, we talk about the first ring being the out of band or the management within the data center or within the branch. But with this second ring now that is bringing, right, multiple sites all together for management, or multiple data centers all together for management. Now with this double ring, you can collect all this sensory information, all this log information, and you can then use this for machine learning, for reacting, for initiating a self-healing process, right? Or even to notify and take further action, right? But that automation requires or needs a management plane to be able to execute that independent of the production network, because the production network eventually is being affected by that event, right, and may not be available.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to ask you probably the toughest question that I can ask you today, and that is, I'm going to need you to give me your answer and not be the CEO of ZPE Systems, right? I need you just to be a technologist, right? And think about put your enterprise consuming hat on. My belief is, a lot of enterprise executives on the consumption side, look at something like hyperautomation with a slightly jaded ear, right? They're not sure where the hype in hyperautomation is, right, versus what they should be doing. What, without giving me a ZPE commercial, right, with just a technology hat on, right, like what should what should these director levels and VP levels that have to go into the CIO and CTO and convince them to take on hyperautomation? What should they be focusing on? Like, what should the story be that they go tell the CIO and CTO on why it's so important to adopt and start implementing these things? What's one or two bits of advice that you could give them?
Yeah, so to me, right, it's about long term, right? A long term solution. So you can continue doing break fixing here and there, but the long term solution needs to be, right, something that you can build on, right, and continue deploying and improving, right? So that's the reason why I would suggest to this C-level guys, right, to look at our blueprint, right, network automation blueprint that we put together, validated by this large hyperscalers and even the user group and ONUG user group has looked at that as well. That is a combination, and we actually published 31 pages of best practice, right, on these blueprints, and it's a combination of multiple solutions, right? It's not just a ZPE there, but you have a choice of multiple solutions there, right? And what we did with that blueprint is that we layered, right, that in a sense that people can consume and avoid mistakes that others already figure out how to solve, right? So it's valid for large organizations, hyperscalers, and is valid for the mainstream as well, right? So to me, that knowledge of putting that best practice in place for the long term, or not trying to fix now, I will address the lack of resources. We address the volume of work that they may have, right? And we'll address the security, the cybersecurity issues. So it's quite important, right, to follow a blueprint or examples, right, of what others successfully have already done.
All right, that's perfect. I'm going to let you get away with that because you mentioned you mentioned how you're connecting with the ONUG community too. It wasn't just and the blueprint, and I've seen the blueprint. It's a great document, and I would invite anybody to take a look at it. So that's fantastic. All right, now I will let you give a brief commercial. How do you want people to reach out to ZPE Systems? What's the best way to learn about what y'all are doing and how to get to you? What do you want to say to folks?
Yeah, so we are actually part of the ONUG, right? So they can reach out to our group there, ONUG Hyperautomation Group, or at the ZPE, right? On our website, there are quite a few use cases and examples. Right? If you want to get a copy of the blueprint, reach out to us at info@zpesystems.com, and then we can send you a copy of the blueprint. And we want to continue, right? This learning process, right? So whatever we learn with in our industry, we want to share with ONUG and the participants there. In the same way, we want to learn with them, right, to continue improving this process. So I'm very pleased to be part of our team, to be part of ONUG, and to be able to contribute to the user group as well.
Well, thanks for that, Arnaldo. I appreciate it. And so that's a great way for us to wrap up. And I'll just echo what Arnaldo said. Look, ONUG and ZPE participates in the working groups. The working groups are part of what we call the collaboration. And so anyone with your consumer or supplier, if you want to be part of what we're calling a connected community and help the industry, help enterprise consumers choose the right technology for the right reasons, then you probably ought to join the collaborative. You can go to onug.net and learn more about that and get access to all this collateral that we produce on behalf of the ONUG community and for the purpose of enabling its members. So with that, Arnaldo, thank you so much for joining us today on this C-Level podcast. It's been really great to get to know you and get your insights. And like I said, you know stuff, so that's good, right? So thanks for being with us. Yeah,
yes,
and
yes,
everybody else, we'll catch you on the next ONUG podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.